Welcome back everybody. Now who doesn't like a nice campfire while they're out and about traveling around this wonderful country of ours? Well, I've gone out and bought not one, not two, but 3 portable fire pits. So I thought I'd run through them and show you what they're all about. So the first one we have here is the Fireside Pop-up Fire Pit. This is all aluminium fire pit that packs up really compact, originates from Arizona over in the US and is a really neat bit of gear. Next we have the Outbackbarbie. Now this is a 3mm laser cut barbecue with a few tricks up its sleeves, so stay tuned as we run through that one. And of course we've got the Adventure Kings funnel style barbecue. There's a few different types available, but we'll run through this particular one to give you a guide if you're in the market for this style barbecue. Now I did a quick run through of all 3 fire pits, running through all the details, the pros and cons and the bits and bobs that you might be interested in. So let's head into the shed and check out all the details. And to start things off, we've got the Fireside Pop-up Fire Pit. And inside here, while it might look like a camp chair, is actually a fully operational and very large pop-up fire pit. It comes in at 3.6 kilos, so it's extremely light. You can carry it around with one arm, no trouble at all, and it's really compact and easy to store away. So let's get into this and I'll show you what it's all about. So the carry bag itself is a pretty lightweight bag. It's got straps on it and obviously one opening zip. To set it up, you simply open up the bag and then you'll see it's all neatly packaged like this. We've obviously used these fire pits because we've been testing them, working out what we like, what we don't like, so we can produce this video. But it essentially folds up into this nice compact little package, and then it's a simple case of releasing these Velcro straps, then we can pull it all out, set it up, and within a minute, you're ready to set up your fire. So you simply roll it out, and you'll notice there's this mesh underlay. This is the base of the fire pit, and is incredibly sturdy. And now the advantage of this stainless steel mesh is that it lets a lot of air through, so you get a very efficient burn, which is great because you have a lot less smoke. The only downside is it's really hard to build up some decent solid coals because this will burn down to a fine dust, which again is a pro when you're packing up because you simply brush it all off the next day and you're ready to pack it all away. You don't have a lot left over because it burns so efficiently. Now, one of the big disadvantages of this is that you shouldn't use any fuels to light the fire. Anything like fire lighters, they do not recommend, and I'm assuming it is because they burn super hot and will deteriorate the mesh a lot quicker. So when you get to camp, you just unravel the mesh base, pull off the 4 sides, and then this frame, you simply pull out, and it's like a camp chair. It folds out like so, you put it down, and then it's simply a case of slotting the 4 sides on. You'll notice the holes at each end. These simply allow them to slide over each corner of the frame, and you're ready to go. And then you simply slide the mesh base on. And again, you'll notice the eyelets in all 4 corners. These simply slide over the top. And you put this in last so that you can pull it out with all the ash and everything on it to empty it out. And I'll show you that when we do the pack away. Then you just simply push it down and you're ready to light your fire. It's a pretty simple process and it comes apart just as easy, to be honest. Measuring 600 by 600, this is the biggest fire pit we have in this review, and it's almost double the size of most of the ones you get. When you're camping and it's a cold night and you've got a few people that need to sit around a campfire, the advantage of this size is quite impressive. We had a party here about a month ago, and you can comfortably sit half a dozen, 10 people around this, and it is extremely warm because the heat radiates out the bottom, out of the top, and you've obviously got that really big surface area that you can load it up with. Surprisingly, this can take a lot of weight as well. Don't be afraid by the mesh in here. While it looks deceiving, it's extremely strong, and it will do up to 100 cycles, I believe, before you even need to think about replacing it. But the good thing is you can buy it as a spare part for about $40, so that if it ever breaks down, you can replace it as opposed to replacing the whole fire pit itself. Now in Australia, you get these from BCF and they retail for $150. The week after I bought this, it was on special for $120. And then even recently, these were down to $99 each from BCF, which is an absolute bargain. So watch the sales, because these do get discounted from time to time. The accessories don't, unfortunately, but let's run through a few of those to see what else you can add on to this. First up is the heat shield, which retails for $40. This is a must for this particular fire pit. I've used this a few times, and the radiant heat coming down will kill the grass off. Trust me, I've got a patch out there from the same party where we didn't put this on, and the grass has never come back. The heat shield itself has a reflective foil upper layer, and it's got a bit of thickness about it, and it simply velcros around the aluminium frame. And if you read the instructions, they say to locate it roughly 3 inches down. It's roughly halfway down the frame of the fire pit, and it does make a really big difference. You can also buy a full ember mat, which goes under the fire pit. However, from all reports that I've read, these heat shields are definitely the way to go. And you simply just attach it to the frame, just like so. And now for the most expensive accessory that goes with this fire pit. And this is something I've been holding off buying. However, if I'm doing this review, I kind of feel like I need to include it. And so for an extra $100, you get the quad fold grilling grates. Now this does bump the weight of the kit up quite a bit. This is 4.5 kilos, which combined with the 3.6 of the base fire pit, it's just over 8 kilos. This is still one of the lightest around, given its surface area, but it is quite flexible when it's set up. So let's get it on, and then we'll run through the pros and cons. You simply unzip the bag, and I do like it comes in a separate bag because that allows you to actually separate the kit out. If you're doing a trip where you knew you weren't going to be cooking and you just wanted an open fire pit, you simply just take this. If you're doing a longer trip where you're likely to be cooking, you'd pack this as well. And it perfectly matches the fire pit in that it comes with 2 more sides, and then you have 4 of these stanchion kits. This actually threads off and you can adjust it, and these simply clip on to each corner. Then we put our sides in, and then the grilling grates on. And then you've got these 2 sides we simply click in. And you can actually lock them in place by winding the thread onto the receiver so that it's all nice and stable. And now you have your quad fold grills. And the advantage here is that you can actually put just half on, or you can put both on, so you've got a full cooking surface. Now these grills are a high quality stainless steel, and the gauge of the rods is actually quite thick compared to a lot of the other ones that you compare them to. These can also support up to 35 kilos, so you can always place your camp oven on this, which is a pretty big bonus as well. So all you do is you simply slot them into place, and just like that, you've got a really large cooking surface for when you're camping and away. And as I said before, you do have the advantage of being able to remove sections, fold it over, and that allows you, because of this large area, to actually move the coals to the side so you're not cooking under direct heat. However, there are a few disadvantages with it. The first being that this grilling surface isn't adjustable, so you can't lift it up and down. The second thing is that you'll notice that a lot do have these days is there aren't any handles to allow you to pick this up and move it around. I don't find I'm typically doing that. However, it seems to be a market thing these days that you have some grab handles and move them around. If you do, make sure you carry around some really good leather gloves. I always have some welding gloves in our kit so that if you do need to pick up any camp ovens or anything like that, you've got a lot of protection on your hands and you're not likely to burn yourself. However, it's extremely stable and it's extremely lightweight, packs down nice and tight. I do really like this, but let's get on to the next one. Now the next one is a little bit less known, and I stumbled across this when I was doing the research for the Fireside Fire Pit and thought, well, that'd be good to review as well. So I picked up this, which is a heavy little bugger. It's called the Outbackbarbie. Now this is a 3mm laser cut fire pit with a difference. So let's pull it out and I'll show you what it's all about. Firstly, as I said, it's extremely heavy. It's around 13 kilos and it comes in this quite decent heavy duty canvas bag. Now the Outbackbarbie retails for around $250. However, I picked it up for $200 and it's quite often on special. So again, just hunt around, wait till it's on special and you buy this direct from the supplier. But opening up the canvas bag, you get this full ember mat, which you can put under the fire. And I think that is really great because a lot of campfires don't have that. And then you have your 2 laser cut ends and you'll notice a lot of different slots in that. And that's what attracted me to this particular fire pit. It's actually quite adaptable. You can set it up in a multitude of different ways to suit a number of purposes. And in my point of view, that's a very important thing to have with anything you take camping, that you can use it for multiple uses and it's quite adaptable depending on where you are and what you're doing. So you get these 2 end pieces, a base piece, and then the 2 typical side pieces with a handle so that you can technically move it around. As I said, make sure you've got some really good leather gloves on because this will get super duper hot. Now, firstly, what sets these type of fire pits from their competitors is that the base has a little rolled edge. So if you do set it up as a V, these interlock together and the charcoal and embers aren't likely to fall through the bottom. So it contains it all within the fire pit itself, which I think is a fairly good thing. You'll note it's just a raw metal finish and it will rust and get a little bit of patina on it, I would call it, and I don't have a big issue with that at all. You can always coat these with a bit of vegetable oil once you're finished with them, just to keep it all seasoned and looking nice. However, for the most part, most people will just pack this away and take it to their next location. And I will add that the pop-up fire pit does come with some quite easy to read, simple, illustrative instructions, and obviously so does the Outbackbarbie. But this is more important because this runs you through the 4 different setups that you can do with this particular fire pit, which I'll show you right now. So you notice how big the ember mat is. That is fantastic. And then the first setup is obviously your typical V. A variation on that is that they also have this base plate. You slot that down inside. So you can put your heat beads and everything on top. And then you've also got this mesh grill, which goes on top as well. So that's the first version, which is the V-shape cooking and fire pit. If you take these 2 components out, obviously you use it as a traditional fire pit. However, there's more. In version 2, you leave one side up and you can have the other side flat, so you can put some larger bits of timber in there. This is particularly good as well if there's just 2 of us and you want to sit around, keep your feet all nice and warm. So that's a bonus. Then you have your open log fire pit style, which has these mounted down really low so you can get some large timber in there and it opens it up a lot more. And then the final version on their instructions, and I'm sure there's a whole heap of other combinations you could try while you're out on the road, is the brazier style, where you put these down in the almost vertical slots and then the base simply slides in and you've got a really nice deep brazier style fire pit. And of course you could always put the mesh on top to cook with as well. Now the Outbackbarbie was actually developed by 2 ladies, and I think it's great that they've come up with this innovative idea that adapts your typical laser cut fire pit so you can use it in a whole heap of different situations. A few negatives I have against it is obviously, look, it's a little bit hard to slot together, but all these fire pits are like that, and it is quite heavy to carry around. So if you're really struggling with weight, I do think these fire pits are a little bit cumbersome and they'll push you over the limit sometimes. It's not a huge fire pit, being roughly 320 by 420, depending on what configuration you've got it in, but it's probably comparable to most fire pits of this style. If I was going to go a similar style fire pit, I really like the look of the Chaos 4x4 Mark II or 3 fire pit, just like this. and they are exceptional value as well. They've got a much more sturdy and adaptable sort of grill plate that goes in over the top, so that might be something you look at as well. I'd buy my budget, I'm buying all of these, so I couldn't buy another one, but that would be something else I would throw in the mix as well. But just note, especially with these 3mm laser cut steel fire pits, they do have a tendency to warp and move around. So while it slots together all nicey nice when it's brand new like this, I do think that down the track it might be a little bit hard and cumbersome to slot together. But I think it's a fairly good option for those that want this traditional style fire pit. And now we're on to the third one, which you would have seen in the introduction. And I've thrown this in because I know there'll be a lot of questions on it. And that is the Adventure Kings Fire Pit and Grill. I bought the combo because I think that's probably the best value. We'll unpack this and we'll go through it. Obviously there's a lot of variance on these particular grills, and I've got something to show you as we go along the way to help you out with that as well. So it comes in a nice bag that's got a little bit of padding in it. It's not too bad. It's obviously not the best you're going to get, but for the purpose that it serves in carrying around your fire pit, it's probably not too bad at all. This as a full combo is quite heavy as well. It comes in at around about 11.4 kilos. The base fire pit itself is 7.1, and then the grill plate adapter, which goes onto the top, is 4.3. So this is getting up there. It's not really that much lighter than the Aussie barbecue that I just went through. And so these two fire pits are actually 3 to 4 kilos heavier than the full Fireside Pop-up Fire Pit with grill all included. So it is a bit if you're trying to watch the kilograms. So anyway, let's unpack it and I'll show you what it's all about. It's got the base plate with the clamps that you put the legs into, and this actually works as a bit of a heat shield as well. My comments with this, as opposed to say the Darchi and a few of the other ones, is that this is just a mild steel painted or coated piece. And so it will eventually corrode and rust a little bit and potentially fall apart, but it's fairly light and it's reasonably good for what it is. Next we have the fire pit structure itself, and it simply just folds out and then you secure it onto the base plate. And just like that, you've got a portable little fire pit. It's got handles so you can carry it around, and it's not too bad at all. It works pretty well. It's not a bad bit of gear, and obviously these are extremely popular. The one thing that you need to be extremely careful with buying these particular fire pits is that they're not all one size. Okay, the size varies quite a bit, because I've also got this, which is a grills fire pit. This is the larger size that they offer, and the size I didn't think would be all that much different. They say it's roughly 400 by 400, whereas the King's fire pit is 420 by 420. However, if you sit these two next to each other, there is a substantial difference in size. So when this full King's combo came on special for around about $150, I grabbed it and I'm updating the pack that I'm using in this particular video. Now, if you're looking online, the biggest giveaway is this grill plate. You'll notice with the larger models, such as the Kings and the Darchi, the Drifter, all the different ones that come in this particular form, they'll have a much wider margin that runs down the outside, which I'll show you on the Adventure Kings version we've got here. On the smaller versions, this gets cut down. The grill size is actually quite similar, but it's obviously the whole area of the fire pit itself which makes a big difference. Now, if I was comparing these two fire pits, I would say this appears to be slightly better constructed, to be honest. It's got a full stainless steel base on it, and it just presents a little bit better than the Adventure Kings one. But let's get back onto that, because that's what we're reviewing as part of this video. So pulling the grill adapter out for the Adventure Kings one, you can see that this band running down through here is a lot wider. So instantly, if you're looking online to buy one of these, that's showing that this is a little bit bigger as well. Now, the sizes from there do vary quite a lot, so it's very important to have a look, because unless you go into a store and compare them side by side, you really can't gauge. I didn't think there'd be such a big difference between the grills and the Adventure Kings, but there is quite a substantial difference. Yes, the grills one weighs quite a bit less, but from a heat generation point of view, the Adventure Kings one is going to be a lot better in that you can just put more fuel in it. And obviously you got the advantage of having a slightly better cooking area as well. So anyway, this grill pit simply clips onto your fire pit like so. You can leave the frame on and remove the grill for when you're starting to get the fire going, getting the heat all building up. That makes it a lot easier to feed all your timber and fuel in. With these style grills, you also get a charcoal plate which sits down into the middle of the fire. like so, and that allows you to distribute your charcoal beads up at a higher location so that you can generate enough heat to cook on your grill itself. When it comes to the grill plate, it's actually quite heavy duty. It's not too bad at all. Another comment I make on the Aussie barbecue is that the grill plate's quite flimsy and light. This, like the Fireside, has got some really good diameter sort of bars on it and is actually quite nice. So I think it'd be fairly decent to cook on. The added advantage you've got is that you can also adjust this up and down to get your food in a good spot depending on the heat that's being generated from the fire pit itself. Now this is obviously an advantage over the Fireside Pop-up style pit where you can't adjust this grilling grate up and down. The one thing with the Fireside is obviously you can move your fuel to one side to take some of the heat away, whereas the compact nature of this, you can't necessarily do that. So I'd say both of these fire pits are fairly equal from that point of view, in that this one you can adjust up and the other one you've got enough surface area to move your fuel around. You'll see that it's a little bit more compact to sit around. It's a little bit lower than the Fireside pit, but I think from a value point of view, particularly if you get these on special, these are great. They're just a little bit heavier, but they do fold up all nice and neat, and you can see from there it took like 2 seconds to set it up. Oh, let's head out now and see how these work. Now before we start cooking, we'll go through how they're performing from a fire pit point of view, getting them started and how they're consuming the wood to this point. The Fireside I find really efficient to start. You don't really need fire lighters, you just need some real light, dry debris to get it started, and with all that air going in from underneath, I find it burns down really, really quick. So one negative against this is it probably does consume a little bit more material than say the other smaller ones behind us. But the heat coming out of this is amazing. It is probably twice as much as those other two fire pits, which is fairly incredible for a portable fire pit. One thing to note is this shield is making a real big difference to the heat. I can put my hand actually on the bottom of the shield and it's not affecting it at all. So that works fairly well. I suppose a side note from that is because of its size, you don't have as much ember waste sort of falling off, particularly when you're starting the fire. There's a lot of room and real estate in this fire where you can condense it into the middle and to avoid things falling off the side. But this is the first time I've used this heat shield and it's pretty incredible. So it's working very well and will stop the damage that's actually sitting underneath the ember blanket of the pit right next to this one. Now I have to say this Outback pit's doing fairly well. It's a little bit harder to get started because it's a smaller volume. I do think it breathes fairly well through the holes underneath that are perforated into the side of it, but you obviously don't want to load it up with really big hard timbers. You want to keep it fairly light to get the heat going through it, build up some coals, and then we're going to start laying some larger timber on it now just to burn it down so we can cook up a bit of lamb and some sausages for the kids. I really do like the ember blanket that's provided with this fire pit. It goes out a fair way from the pit itself and it does actually collect a fair few bits of charcoal and bits and pieces that fall out, particularly when you're trying to get these fires started. Noting the small size of the firebox, you often have little bits hanging off to the side unless you're super duper neat and tidy. There's not too many that come with this standard, so for me that's a bit of a bonus and a real plus to go with this particular fire pit, considering the adaptive nature of it as well. And now for the King's fire pit. It started off really well and it was a lot more efficient than the Outbackbarbie for some reason, even though the volume of it's pretty similar. It just seems to draw the air through a lot better than the 3mm plate style fire pits such as the Outbackbarbie. As with the Outbackbarbie, you can't really load this up with big large timbers, particularly from the start, as it does smoulder itself back out. But once it gets going, it's generally not too bad. I don't think the heat coming out of this is nearly as good as the Fireside, unfortunately. There is quite a drastic difference in how efficient these two fire pits work, comparing the Fireside to the Adventure Kings. But all in all, I mean, it's still working okay, but if you sat those two together, which is what we did a few months ago at the 40th that we had here in the backyard, there was quite a noticeable difference in temperature between the two. There's another little trick that obviously the Fireside can do that these two can't, and I'll show you that right now before we get into cooking. Now, another nice advantage of having a large fire pit, similar to your fire pit at home, we've got a large one in the backyard here, is if you're out camping and you've got a lot of really wet timber, you can actually just stack it up on the side so that it can dry out a little bit before you lay it over onto the fire. Now that's a massive advantage that this pit has over the other two, because you can do that quite easily. So now I'll stoke these up, get them really cranking, let them burn down a little bit, and we'll do a bit of cooking. Dinner's pretty much ready. I'll tell you what, it was a little bit hectic trying to cook 3 meals on 3 different barbecues. All we did was cook up some sausages, some lamb chops, and I did some potato, sweet potato and onion in the frying pan, and it worked really well. I must say it's good being able to move things around on this Fireside pit. That does actually help quite a lot. It obviously generates a lot of heat as well, so that's a little bit you've got to manage as you're trying to cook and going. I was actually really amazed by how quickly they cooked. Now we'll do a quick review of the other two and reconvene in the morning, and I'll show you how to pack all these up. The Outbackbarbie is a bit of a mixed bag. I like the different things you can do with it. I think it'd be great for 2 people, and obviously the ember mat as a standard thing is pretty good as well. It actually cooked up a lot better than I thought. I wasn't a huge fan of this grill. It's very light, but you know, for little meals, it's probably not too bad and things on the run. It obviously just doesn't have the warmth or the volume of the larger fire pits. I think if you set this up as a brazier style, you probably load it up a little bit more and it'll be a bit more effective, especially on those cold nights. And the last one is obviously the Adventure Kings. So let's check that out. Now the Adventure Kings fire pit, that really surprised me. I'm actually a bit of a fan. You have to sit a lot closer to it. And obviously if you've got a lot of people, it's not quite as good as the Fireside. But I mean, for a budget, really cool, compact, pack it away barbecue that is literally up in seconds, it's pretty good. One big thing I did like over the Fireside is the ability to lift this grill up and down. We had an instance where we just want a little bit more heat, so I dropped it down really quickly, popped it back up, and it was right on. So I would say this is not a bad deal, particularly if you can get it on special. Out of those two, I think, you know, it's a pretty close race. The Outbackbarbie obviously has its purpose, but I think for a family in particular, it's maybe just a little bit on the small side. Packing up the next day is a pretty straightforward process with the Fireside pit. You simply pull the mesh out. Then it's simply a case of just emptying out the ash and giving everything a quick brush off. There wasn't actually that much ash on the bottom of the heat shield, which is pretty good. And then I think it's a good idea just to lay it over the top so you can roll it all up together with the rest of your frame as you pulled it out. The Outbackbarbie is pretty much the same. You just disassemble it all and then dispose of the ash. And then this patch here is the scarring that was left behind from the Fireside pit a few months ago. Interestingly, there are some burn marks that have gone through the back of this ember mat. So from that point of view, while I was impressed with the size of it, you will notice even in the videos that there's quite a lot of bits and pieces that fall through the bottom of the Outbackbarbie fire pit onto the ember mat, but they've actually sort of melted their way through the ember mat as well. So, I mean, really, that's a little bit disappointing as well. And with the King's fire pit, it's the same. I would just tip this into a bucket or some other place to get rid of all your coals and ashes once you're finished for the day. One thing to note with the Kings is obviously This base is quite compact and pretty much in line with the fire pit itself. So, you know, you do have a few embers and bits and pieces that do fall on the ground next to it. So I think from that point of view, it would be probably best practice to have an ember mat that actually works, put it down, and that'll just protect any of the ground. But at the end of the day, it's just taking a little bit of care and cleaning up after yourself. And I've also got these full leather gloves. So if you're packing up early in the morning and things are still quite warm, it's a good idea to put these on to make sure you don't burn yourself. And the same thing if you're camping and in particular using camp ovens, these really are a must. I've got some of these at home and I've got another set in the caravan as well. And they're just handy to have if you ever need them while on the road. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and it helps you out if you're in the hunt for a portable fire pit yourself. So I'm not going to recommend any particular fire pit. They all have their own application and benefits, pros and cons, depending on what you're doing, where you're traveling and how your setup actually works. But for me, I do have to say it's hard to go past this Fireside pit. It is a beautiful bit of gear. I love, again, but it's all aluminium. It just packs up into that tiny little bag. Pop it away. You can actually carry it into a campsite if you're trekking, and the heat that comes out of this thing is impressive. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you're in the market for a fire pit, it helps you out. Anyway, I've got to finish this beer off, go inside and get ready for the rest of the week. Might sit around the fire for a little bit and just enjoy it. It's nothing better than a nice warm fire in the middle of winter. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Pop a few comments below. Let us know what's your favourite fire pit. I know this is just touching the surface, and there's a few that I found while I was hunting around that I thought were quite different to let everyone taste the different types that are around. And most importantly, as I always say, get out there, stay safe and have fun. We'll catch you next time.